Stepmother beat me. The text glowed on the kitchen iPad. 5 minutes later, my father cut my phone service and locked every shared account, deciding I was a liar. I stood on the Boston docks, the wind cutting sharp, and understood I'd been set up. That night, I decided to flip the main breaker on the whole system. Not the phone, but the truth. My name is Mackenzie McGee. I am 32 years old, and I am the operations manager for power and energy at Harborline Systems. We are a phantom limb of Boston, the part of the city that never sleeps, because it's too busy moving the goods that let everyone else rest. My world is high-voltage substations, refrigerated container stacks, and the massive ship-to-shore cranes that define the skyline. My job is to ensure the power that moves millions of tons of cargo never, ever stops. It's a life measured in kilowatts and continuity. I live alone. My place is a small loft converted from an old wool warehouse overlooking the Fort Point Channel. The floors are original plank wood, scarred and uneven, and they always smell faintly of brine and diesel, a scent that blows in from the reserved channel. It's not the pristine glass and steel Boston my father inhabits. My view is of the water, the bridges, and the container terminal itself, lit up like a stark industrial constellation against the night sky. My life revolves around the night shift, around the hum of high-capacity reefer units and the rhythmic, metallic groan of the gantry cranes. It is a life of physical presence and absolute accountability. My father, Graham Pierce, lives in a different universe. He occupies a high floor in Beacon Hill, a world of polished brass, old money, and quiet influence. He remarried 10 years ago, bringing Monica Raines into our lives. Monica is a professional philanthropist, a woman whose entire career is built on high-gloss charity galas and leveraging social connections. She chairs committees, hosts benefits, and ensures her photograph is taken alongside the recipients of her manufactured generosity. In this new family structure, I am the anomaly. My half-sister, Chloe, is the designated star. She is 23, effortlessly photogenic, and manages the social media narrative for Monica's various causes. Chloe is the future, the bright, sparkling reflection of their success. I am the past. I am the manual labor daughter. This is the running joke at family dinners, the ones I am expected to attend twice a month. Monica says it with a bright, tight smile. Mackenzie, darling, try not to bring the smell of the docks in with you. Graham just nods, proud of his wife's wit. They don't grasp the irony. They sip wine chilled by electricity I root. In a home lit by a grid I help maintain. They see dirt. I see infrastructure. The incident happened on a Tuesday. The text message that triggered the avalanche appeared on the family iPad, the one that sits on the marble countertop in their kitchen, synced to all our iMessage accounts. Stepmother beat me. Just 4 words. I wasn't there. I was at the terminal, midway through a 72-hour shift surge, troubleshooting a primary transformer. The person who found the message was Monica, and the person she showed it to, her face presumably a mask of carefully curated shock and pain, was Graham. My father did not call me. He did not send a text asking for clarification. He did not wait for an explanation. In his world, appearance is reality. A threat to the narrative is a threat to the foundation. He is a banker. He manages risk. And I had just become a catastrophic liability. 5 minutes after Monica showed him that iPad, Graham, from the comfort of his leather-bound study, executed a series of precise digital clicks. He removed my phone from the family plan. He changed the password on the shared Apple ID, the one that still paid for the few subscriptions I'd had since college. He deactivated the supplementary credit card he'd insisted I keep for emergencies. I was on the night shift when the blackout hit. I was 200 feet in the air, harnessed inside the cabin of Crane 5, running a diagnostic with the operator. My phone, buzzing in my pocket with routine system alerts, suddenly went silent. I pulled it out. No service. I assumed it was a dead zone in the cabin, a quirk of steel and signal, but when I got back to the control room, it was the same, a dead, useless brick. I tried the break room Wi-Fi. The Apple ID login failed. Password incorrect. A cold prickle started at the base of my neck. I went to the cafeteria to get a coffee. To think. The card reader for the family emergency card flashed red. Declined. I stood there for a full minute, the smell of burnt coffee and stale bagels filling the room. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a billing error. This was a deliberate, systematic severing. This was not a family disagreement. This was a power play. This was an excision. He had unplugged me from the grid. The truth of the message was mundane. It was logistical. It was boring. It was not the dramatic, violent confession Monica had framed it as. The real message was a fragment from a voice note I'd dictated to myself earlier that day, walking back from a frustrating preliminary meeting with the Port Authority. My phone, transcribing my words, had captured this. Stepmother beat me to the permit meeting. That was it. Monica, in her role as a civic-minded advisor to the city planning board, had managed to get an earlier, unscheduled slot with the permit regulators. She had presented her community impact assessment for a new cold storage warehouse project, a project Harborline Systems was also bidding on. She had gotten there first. It was a professional annoyance, a note to self about a bureaucratic setback. Monica, seeing that fragment on the iPad, knew exactly what the full context was. She was at that meeting, but she also saw the opportunity. She saw those 4 words, isolated and damning. Stepmother beat me. She used that ambiguity like a weapon. She presented it to my father as proof of my instability, my jealousy, my desperation to smear the family she had so carefully built. She needed me neutralized, especially now that her civic work and my port operations were beginning to overlap. At the port, the first rule of high-voltage power is absolute transparency. Electricity and truth are the same. Both require a clear, dedicated, and verifiable path. You cannot guess. You cannot assume a hidden fault, a bad connection, a lie in the schematic. That is what causes fires. That is what kills. My father, blinded by Monica's narrative, had just cut the power based on a faulty signal. He had abandoned the most basic protocol: verify the source. I left my shift. I told my supervisor I had a family emergency, a statement that tasted like ash. I walked past the stacks, past the idling yard trucks, to the edge of the quay. I stood in the deep, vibrating dark, the only light coming from the harsh sodium floods overhead. The black water of the channel slapped against the pilings. I replayed the timeline, the sync time of the iMessage, the moment the iPad was accessed, the window of time Monica had to delete the subsequent, clarifying context before Graham saw it, the logs, the family's internal network router, the iCloud data. Monica had set the trap. Graham had pulled the trigger, but they had both forgotten what I do for a living. I don't just use the power, I manage the grid. I know how to read the schematics. That night, standing in the cold, salt-laced wind, I made a decision. I was going to restore power to my own life, and to do that, you always start with the data. I drove back to my loft, the no-service icon on my phone a burning red symbol of my disconnection. My loft felt cold, the silence amplified by the faint, distant hum of the port. But this was my territory. This was my substation. I went to the steel shelving unit against the far brick wall, where I keep obsolete hardware and diagnostic tools. Under a pile of shielded Cat7 cable, I pulled out my old MacBook Pro. It was a heavy silver block from nearly a decade ago, a machine I'd last used consistently when I was running simulations for the smart grid conversion at the K-Line terminal. Its main utility had been running Apple Configurator to flash firmware onto sensor arrays. It was also the last machine I'd used that had a full, local backup of my user profile from before my father's wedding. I hadn't synced it to the new family iCloud account. It was a digital time capsule. I plugged it in. The machine chimed, a sound from a different life, and the screen flickered to life. I bypassed the network connection, keeping it offline. I didn't want it polluted by the present. I mounted the external drive containing the local backup and began the restore process. This wasn't about my photos or my music. This was about the database. It took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of pacing the old wooden floors, watching the progress bar creep across the screen. When it finished, I rebooted and logged into the restored profile. I opened the terminal, my fingers moving automatically. I navigated deep into the archived user library, to the iMessage database file. It was a simple SQLite file. Chat, DB. I opened it, not with the friendly message interface, but with a command line query tool. Select text, date, source from message where handle ID is, select handle id from handle where ID e +1 617 555 1212. I targeted my own number. The database spun, and then the records filled the screen. I scrolled back to Tuesday morning. There it was, the original, unmodified entry. It wasn't a text message I had typed. The metadata tag for source was clear. Com, Apple, voice memos, transcript. I found the full entry. Timestamp. Go 6:40:17 a.m. Note to self. Logistics meeting pushed. Stepmother beat me to the permit meeting. Need to follow up with Port Authority. It was exactly as I remembered. A mundane, frustrated note. I cross-referenced the time with my work logs. 6:40 a.m. was precisely 10 minutes after I had gotten off a contentious preliminary call with the port inspector. My phone had transcribed my muttered complaint as I walked the yard. Now I had the baseline. The next step was to prove the manipulation. The deletion itself was a data point. I needed to know when the axe fell. I couldn't get that from my old Mac. I needed to see the traffic logs from my father's house. Graham Pierce is a brilliant financial strategist, but his digital security is abysmal. He believes a high-end firewall appliance is all that matters. He never changes the default administrative passwords on the internal hardware. I opened a secure browser tab and typed the gateway IP for the Beacon Hill house. The router's login portal appeared. I typed admin and the default password 1234. I was in. I navigated to the system logs, the traffic monitor. I filtered by MAC address, isolating the device ID for the kitchen iPad. I watched its activity for Tuesday morning. It was dormant until 06:41:02 a.m. At that precise moment, it accessed the iCloud sync server. It authenticated, pulled data, and then sent a new packet. Someone, physically holding that iPad, had activated it and accessed the message stream just seconds after my full transcript had synced. I dug deeper, looking for packet inspection data. I found a metadata flag timestamped at 06:41:14 a.m., a deletion command. They found the message, they read it, they understood the context, and then, exactly 12 seconds later, Monica, it had to be Monica, had manually deleted the clarifying fragment. To the permit meeting. She had surgically altered the data, leaving only the 4 words that would ignite my father's rage. She had manufactured the evidence and handed the weapon to Graham. This was no longer a misunderstanding. This was fabrication. I knew I couldn't just screenshot this. A screenshot is meaningless. I needed the raw data, preserved in a way that was forensically sound. I plugged in a fresh terabyte external drive. I went back to my own terminal. I unmounted the old Mac's internal drive and began a full, bit-for-bit forensic image, using the DD command. It was slow, a meticulous digital excavation. if/devs disk2 of/volumes evidence Mac image img. While the disk image was being created, I ran a checksum against the router log files I had exported. I created a SHA-256 hash, a unique digital fingerprint. Any change, any alteration by even a single bit, and the hash would fail. My evidence was now pristine, sealed. I needed to know my legal standing. I pulled out the cash I kept in a fireproof bag in my closet, my grid-down money, and walked to a convenience store 2 blocks away. I bought a prepaid SIM card for $40 and a cheap burner phone. I inserted the SIM and powered it on. For the first time in my adult life, I was digitally invisible. I dialed Maeve Doyle. Maeve and I have been friends since college, but we are wired differently. I see systems. She sees leverage. She's a junior partner at a boutique legal tech firm that specializes in digital discovery. Maeve, I said, my voice flat. Kenzie, what number is this? A new one. I have a technical question regarding chain of custody for digital evidence. I laid it out clinically, the iMessage database restored from a local backup, the router logs accessed via default credentials, the forensic image of the source drive, the hash files. I explained the deletion, the timing, the context. There was a pause on the line. Maeve isn't emotional, she's analytical. Okay, she said. Your instinct on the DD image and the hash was correct. That's your foundation. You've preserved the state of the evidence. The router log is gold. It establishes opportunity and timeline. It places her hand on the digital knife. Is it admissible? It's complicated, she said. You accessed his router without explicit permission, but it's your father's house, and the data relates directly to your iMessage account, which was part of his family plan. A good argument can be made. The key, Kenzie, is that you didn't alter anything. You copied. You preserved. Do not talk to them. Do not send them this. You hold it. This is your defense. And it might be your offense. What else? Did you get Wi-Fi logs from Monica's personal devices? Her phone? Her laptop? I can't get into her personal devices. Only the shared iPad and the router. The router is enough for now. It shows the device was used. This is solid. What are you going to do? I'm still tracing the circuit, I said. This isn't just a family dispute. It feels too clean, too convenient. Good. Keep digging, Maeve said. And Kenzie, stay off the old number. Consider yourself dark. The call ended. I was on my own, but I had a verified schematic. I went back to the loft and installed a new dash cam in my truck. It was wired to its own battery pack, set to record on motion and log GPS with a precise timestamp. If I was going to be accused of things, I would have an immutable record of my own location. Every trip I made, every time I parked, every visit to my father's house, if I ever made one, would be documented. My silence would be protected by data. But the question remained, why? Why would Monica orchestrate such a high-risk, scorched earth attack on me? It wasn't just to win a fight with Graham. This was too precise. I sat at my work terminal, the one I used to monitor Harborline's grid. I pulled up my files on the new cold storage warehouse project. It's a massive undertaking, requiring a complete overhaul of the electrical substation at Pier 5. Our bid is competitive, but the permitting process has been stalled for months. The permit. Beat me to the permit meeting. I opened the Boston City Public Records portal. I searched for the Port Authority Permit Committee. The list of advisory board members loaded. And there, halfway down the list, was her name, Monica Raines, Civic Advisor, Harbor Hearts Charity. My blood went cold. I cross-referenced the date of the meeting she had attended. It wasn't just an informal chat. It was a closed-door pre-approval session for the warehouse permit. The same permit my company, Harborline Systems, was desperately trying to secure. This wasn't about a text message. This wasn't about me being the manual labor daughter. Monica had just framed the lead power manager for the competing bid as an unstable, vindictive liar. She hadn't just attacked a stepdaughter. She had professionally neutralized a threat to a multi-million-dollar contract. I stared at the screen, the pieces clicking into place like industrial circuit breakers. This was a conflict of interest on a massive scale, and I suspected Monica wasn't doing it for the good of the city. She was beating me to the permit meeting to steer that contract toward a friendly contractor, someone who stood to gain from her position on the inside. My father hadn't just cut me off. He had been used as the tool to do it. The discovery of Monica's name on the permit committee list didn't just connect the dots. It changed the chemical composition of my anger. It shifted it from a hot, jagged feeling of personal betrayal into something cold, heavy, and conductive. It became fuel. My father's betrayal was a blunt force trauma. Monica's, I now understood, was a meticulously planned assassination of my professional credibility. It was all so clean, so efficient. I shut down the router logs and closed the terminal. The data was safe, imaged and hashed. The investigation phase was over. Now, I had to process what it meant. My loft is my sanctuary, my spiritual substation. The old brick walls, nearly 3 feet thick, insulate me from the city's noise. The original plank floors are uneven, scarred by a century of wool casks and machinery, and they creak under my weight. I've always loved that sound. It's the sound of a structure that has borne weight and held. The air, even with the windows closed, carries the faint metallic tang of the channel and the diesel from the yard. It smells like work. It smells like reality. I sat on the worn leather sofa, looking out the tall, arched window at the channel. The water was black, reflecting the lights from the South Boston waterfront. The silence in the loft was punctuated only by the low, steady hum of my refrigerator. It's an old commercial-grade model I rebuilt myself. Its compressor kicks in with a solid, reassuring thrum, like a vacuum pump maintaining pressure. It's the sound of equilibrium. This is my space. I am not the manual labor daughter here. I am not an inconvenient, greasy relative. Here, I am the systems manager. Everything in this space works because I understand it, and I maintain it. This calculated attack from Monica, this digital severing, was designed to reopen a wound I've spent my entire adult life trying to cauterize. I was 15 when I learned the first truth about power. My father, newly remarried and distracted, had missed our scheduled weekend. I ended up taking the blue line to the port on my own. Half curious, half furious, just needing to be somewhere real. Sal Rossi, the terminal supervisor back then, found me standing by the security fence, watching the giant ship-to-shore cranes. He was a broad, weathered man who smelled like coffee and hydraulic fluid. He didn't yell. He just looked at me. "You lost, kid?" "No," I said. What is that?" I pointed to the main substation, a massive fenced-in city of ceramic insulators and heavy copper bus bars. It was humming loud enough to feel in my teeth. Sal shielded his eyes, looking up at it. That's the heart." He pointed to the sky. "You see lightning? That's chaos. That's power with no place to go. This," he pointed back to the substation, "is organized lightning. It's the most powerful thing in the world, but it's useless, even dangerous, until you give it a clear, clean path and a job to do. Never forget that. Chaos is useless. Order is power." That sentence became the blueprint for my life. I went to school for electrical engineering. I came back to the port. I learned to organize the lightning. My father and Monica, they lived in a world of unorganized lightning. Theirs was a world of social chaos, of shifting narratives and appearances, of power derived from who you knew and what they thought of you. I remember that same year, at the first Christmas dinner in the Beacon Hill house, Monica was trying to establish her new role as Lady of the Manor. The dining room was suffocatingly hot, filled with the scent of expensive, nondescript white flowers and beeswax candles. Graham gave Chloe, then 13, a small, velvet box. Inside was a delicate platinum necklace with a single, perfect pearl. "For my new star," he said. Monica clapped, her eyes crinkling in manufactured delight. Then my father turned to me. He handed me a crisp department store gift bag. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a $25 gift card. "And Monica and I were thinking," he said, his voice taking on that falsely cheerful tone, "you could buy yourself something clean." Monica laughed, a sound like ice cubes clinking. "Yes, darling," she said, tapping my hand. "We do love that you're so practical, but a girl should really do clean work. All that grease and oil, it's just so unfeminine. Don't bring the smell of the docks home, please. It clings to the upholstery." It was never one single moment. It was the erosion. It was the constant, low-grade abrasion of their casual dismissal. It was the implication that my work, my passion, my competence, was something to be washed off before entering their world. They never understood what I saw in it. They saw dirt. I saw the high-mast sodium lights hitting the black water at 3 in the morning, turning the fog a deep, electric orange. I heard the rhythmic, hydraulic groan of the gantry cranes lifting containers, a sound I've always associated with the city's true heartbeat. It is the sound of purpose, the sound of connection, the sound of the world moving. The pain they inflicted was never jealousy. I didn't want the pearl. I didn't want the empty compliments or the clean work. The pain was invisibility. It was the slow, crushing realization that my own father looked at the complex, vital systems I managed and saw only a social inconvenience. He saw a daughter who had failed to reflect his new, polished life. In their house, I was a ghost who sometimes smelled of salt water and ozone. I made a promise to myself when I signed the lease on this loft. I was 22, fresh out of my apprenticeship. If they won't give you a seat at their table, you go to the yard and weld one yourself, a better one that can hold real weight. This loft is that seat. This is my table. Monica's fabricated message, "The stepmother beat me," was designed to trigger that old wound. It was calibrated to make me seem unstable, jealous, and pathetic. The dirty daughter lashing out. She was counting on my old pattern of hurt. She expected me to get loud, get angry, and prove her narrative correct. She expected me to scream into the void, and for my father to unplug me. And he did. But this time is different. I am not 15, desperate for a kind word. I am not 22, trying to prove my worth. I am 32, and I am the operations manager. I am the one who keeps their lights on. I will not retreat. I will not scream. My objective isn't revenge. Revenge is a catastrophic failure. It's an arc flash, a chaotic, explosive release of energy that destroys the circuit, the equipment, and the operator. It's loud, bright, and ultimately, just more chaos. My objective is correction. I am not going to blow up their system. I am going to remeter the entire circuit, identify the fault, and then, very calmly, reverse the flow. I will use their own infrastructure to show them exactly where the power is really going. I walked over to my workbench, a heavy steel table covered with diagnostic tools and schematics. I pulled out my primary engineering notebook, the one bound in black, hard-wearing canvas. I flipped past the load calculations for the new reefer racks, past the diagrams for the Pier 5 substation upgrade. I turned to a fresh, grid-lined page. With a heavy graphite mechanical pencil, I wrote 3 words, pressing down hard. Truth, order, visibility. This was no longer a family problem. This was a systems diagnostic, and I was about to perform a full audit, the Harbor Hearts Gala. It was Monica's crown jewel, the centerpiece of her social and professional identity. It was held every year in the grand ballroom of the Archer Seaport, a glittering glass box of a hotel overlooking the main channel. I didn't need an invitation to know the details. The event was its own media entity. From my loft, using public Wi-Fi and the burner phone, I accessed the event's promotional website. The theme was "Lighting the Way for Boston's Future." The irony was so thick it was suffocating. The landing page featured a professionally shot video, no doubt produced by Chloe's team. It was a masterpiece of narrative construction. Monica, in a pristine white hard hat, one that had never seen a day of actual work, pointing elegantly at architectural renderings. Monica, accepting a check from a smiling banker. Monica, embracing a child at a community center, her eyes shining with practiced empathy. The logo, a stylized ship's wheel where the spokes were meant to be heartstrings, pulsed in the corner of the screen. It looked less like a ship's wheel and more like a closing aperture. My father, Graham Pierce, was listed as the gala's financial co-chair. He loved this. He fed on the perceived stability, the image of the model family giving back. His reputation in the tight-knit world of Boston banking wasn't just built on assets. It was built on this perception of unimpeachable character, of old-world integrity. A stable, philanthropic home life was good for business. It reassured his partners that he was a man of soundness, of judgment. I, the greasy-handed daughter with her fabricated accusations, was a threat to that narrative. I was a volatile stock he needed to dump. And then I clicked on the sponsors page. The logos were tiered: platinum, silver, bronze, and at the top, in the most prominent position, was the gold star sponsor, North Bay Contractors. My breath caught. It was a physical jolt, like touching a live wire I'd mistaken for dead. North Bay, the very company vying against Harborline for the multi-million-dollar electrical contract for the new cold storage facility. The contract Monica was in a position to influence. This wasn't just a conflict of interest. This was a transaction, laundered through high-gloss charity. North Bay wasn't just a sponsor, they were a client. I sent the screenshot of the sponsor page, along with Monica's name on the permit committee roster, to Maeve. I used a one-time encrypted email service. Her reply came 3 hours later. To my burner phone. Kenzie, this is bad, but it's also smart. Her position is unpaid advisory commissioner. It's a loophole. She doesn't have a direct vote, so she's not technically required to recuse herself or disclose the donation. But as an advisor, she gets to shape the technical requirements. She can set the table. I understood immediately. She didn't need a vote. She could sit in those meetings and guide the conversation. She could introduce specifications that only North Bay could meet. She could poison the well against Harborline's bid, painting us as unreliable, overpriced, or under-equipped. And what better way to undermine our bid than to suggest our lead power manager for the project, me, was an unstable, vindictive, and emotionally compromised liar? It was corporate sabotage, executed with a scalpel, and my own father was the anesthetic. Monica's plan was suddenly crystal clear. She had to discredit me before the gala. The gala was the victory lap. It was where she would publicly thank her generous partners like North Bay. If I showed up, still angry about the permit meeting, I would be a massive liability. I might make a scene. I might connect the dots publicly. She had to neutralize me by framing me as a jealous, troubled daughter. She guaranteed that any accusation I made would be dismissed as just more of Mackenzie's drama. It was a preemptive strike, and it had worked perfectly. 2 days later, the second piece of the puzzle arrived. I was back in my loft, running diagnostics on an old audiovisual switcher I'd salvaged from the yard. My burner phone buzzed, a new email, from a different anonymous, encrypted address. The subject line was blank. There was one attachment. It was a photograph, a slightly blurry, hastily taken photo of a laptop screen, displaying a calendar entry. It was a private meeting, scheduled for the week before the text message incident. Consult Mr. J. Kelling, North Bay. J. Kelling, James Kelling, the CEO of North Bay Contractors. They hadn't just been sponsor and charity head, they had met privately, they had coordinated, and then, armed with their shared objective, Monica had waited for the opportune moment to remove me from the equation. She didn't have to wait long. My own frustrated voice memo had given her the perfect weapon. The final move from their side came on a Friday. I was at the terminal, splicing a high-capacity fiber optic line, my hands deep in the delicate, complex work. My burner phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text, but not from my father's number. It was from Chloe. He was using my half-sister as his messenger. The message was 5 sentences. It was sterile, cold, and final. It felt like a press release from Graham's bank. Dad wanted me to tell you that your recent behavior has been deeply disappointing. This fabricated story about Monica is unacceptable. You are not welcome at the Harbor Hearts Gala. He expects you to stay home. He will reconsider his position when you have learned to respect this family. When you have learned to respect this family. Not when you tell the truth. Not when we talk this out. It was a sentence. I had been tried, convicted, and banished by a court I didn't even know was in session. He didn't just believe the lie. He was enforcing it. He was protecting the asset. He was protecting Monica, the gala, North Bay, and the entire glittering fake narrative. I stood there in the wind, the smell of salt and ozone filling my lungs. They had cut me off. They had locked the doors, changed the passwords, and cast me out into the cold. They thought I was gone. I typed back a single two-letter reply to Chloe. Okay. Let them think I was defeated. Let them think I was silenced. I would stay home. I would not attend the gala as a guest. My silence would be absolute, publicly. Mackenzie McGee was gone. She was the disgraced daughter, licking her wounds in her warehouse loft. But privately, I was already at work. They wanted a narrative? I would give them one. They wanted to light the way? I would oblige. My plan began to form, not with anger, but with the cold precision of a systems diagnostic. Monica had built her stage. It was a beautiful, expensive, high-tech stage with massive LED screens, a broadcast-quality sound system, and multiple high-definition camera feeds. It was the infrastructure she used to project her power. And I knew infrastructure. I knew about video switchers and signal paths. I knew about audio routing, redundant power supplies, and network-controlled lighting grids. She thought that stage was her fortress. She was wrong. It was her primary vulnerability. I would not go to the gala to argue. I would not go to shout. I would go to present the data. I would take all the disparate pieces, the iMessage metadata, the router logs showing the 12-second deletion, the sponsor page for North Bay, the screenshot of the private meeting, and the cold, hard timeline, and I would weave them into a single, undeniable visual schematic. I would illustrate the true path of the money and the lie. I would not use my own voice. I would use the evidence. I would use her own stage, her own lights, and her own multi-thousand-dollar sound system. I would wait until the precise moment she was at the podium, basking in the applause. I would wait until every eye in that room, including my father's, was on her. And then I would flip the main switch. The Archer Seaport Hotel was a cathedral of glass and brushed steel. Its grand ballroom was a 3-story cavern, one entire wall a window overlooking the harbor. It was designed to impress, to awe, to make the money feel important. To me, it was just another system. I spent 2 days conducting a non-intrusive survey. I went in as a potential client, asking for a tour for a corporate event. I walked the floor, noting the integrated J-boxes in the floor, the layout of the service corridors, and, most importantly, the location of the audio-visual control room. It was tucked away on the mezzanine level, a small, dark room with a one-way glass window looking down on the stage. I noted the brand of the main mixing console, the video switchers, and the patch bays. They were running a standard setup, a main presentation laptop, a backup, and multiple SDI camera feeds, all routed through a Blackmagic 8M production switcher. It was professional, but it was standard, and standard is predictable. The final piece of reconnaissance was the power. I found the main breaker panel for the ballroom in a service closet disguised as a mahogany wall panel. They had a dedicated circuit for the AV booth, which was good, but the main power cutoff for the entire ballroom was accessible. A single technician, panicked by a rogue video, could kill the entire show. I would have to bring my own power. I didn't need to force my way in. In my line of work, you know people. You know the freelance technicians who string the cables for every major event in the city. I made one call to a guy named Rico. Rico and I had spent a very long, very cold night 3 years ago rewiring a flooded junction box at the Conley terminal. He owed me one. "Rico, you working the Archer Gala on the 16th? I asked, using my new burner. "God, I hope not," he grumbled. "That's a tuxedo gig. Why?" "I need access to the AV room, not during the show, before, and maybe—" I paused. "I need to be the one in the chair." "Kenzie, that's a high-profile, high-pressure show. The client is a nightmare." "I know. I need a pass. I'll take your setup shift. I'll run all your SDI and fiber. You just show up, check my work, and hand me the temp pass for the control room. I'll handle the show." He was quiet for a moment. He knew my work. He knew I didn't make mistakes. "You're better on the board than I am anyway," he finally said. "Fine, but you screw this up. You've never heard of me." "You'll never hear from me," I promised. I spent the next 48 hours in my loft, not just gathering data, but programming the payload. I wasn't just going to show a document, I was going to show the schematic. I opened my professional simulation software, the same program I used to model grid loads, and began to build the money circuit. It was clean, stark, and brutal. I started with a stylized graphic of Monica's Harbor Hearts Gala logo. From it, a single, thick line of energy emerged. It fed into a junction box labeled Gala General Fund. From there, the circuit split. A small 20% line went to the actual charities, the ones she used in her videos. The main line, 80%, flowed into a series of 3 nodes, designed to look like shell companies, the satellite contractors I'd uncovered through public filings. From this distribution block, the money recombined, flowing directly into a node labeled North Bay Contractors. Then, the final connection, a heavy-gauge cable running from North Bay to a new, previously unmentioned node, Boston Civic Future PAC. A quick search had revealed that this political action committee was the primary funding source for 2 of the key city councilors on the Port Authority Oversight Board. Monica wasn't just influencing the permit, she was funding the politicians who voted on it. I animated the flow, a slow, undeniable pulse of energy moving through the system. I overlaid the key data points, the date of her private meeting with North Bay, the timestamp of the iMessage deletion, 06:41:14 a.m., the public donation record from North Bay. At the bottom right, in a small, intrusive font, I embedded the full AHA 256 hash of the complete, unredacted evidence package. It was my citation. It was the link to the verifiable, pristine data. It was the proof that this wasn't an accusation. It was a diagnostic report. I rendered the entire sequence as a 52-second video file, high resolution, 4K, at 60 frames per second. It was designed to be broadcast quality, silent, clinical, and devastating. The next step was delivery. I created a new playlist on a solid-state drive. It contained all the official gala videos, the opening montage, the year in review, and the 2 Our Community Impact videos that were scheduled to play before and after Monica's main speech. My 52-second file was inserted between them. The gala schedule, which Chloe had proudly posted on the event blog, was my clock. Monica was scheduled to speak at 8:45 p.m. Her speech would be followed by a 2-minute thank you sponsors video. That video would be followed by a final 3-minute Our Future video. Between those 2 videos, the AV operator would have to switch sources. Even in an automated playlist, there is a gap, a buffer, a single golden second where the system cues the next file. That was my window. I wouldn't just insert my file. I would program the production switcher to recognize the end of the sponsor's video and autoplay my file as the next source, before automatically rolling to the future video. It would look like a planned part of the show. On the day of the gala, I arrived at the Archer Seaport at 9 a.m., wearing black work pants and a Harborline Systems polo shirt. Rico met me at the service entrance. He looked tired. "The board is all yours," he said, handing me the laminated temporary AV pass. "I ran the fiber. You just patch and test. Don't make me regret this. Kenzie." "Check my work," I said. I spent the next 6 hours in that dark, cold room, meticulously testing every connection. I patched the camera feeds, I equalized the microphones, and I loaded my playlist onto the primary and backup presentation machines. Then, I addressed the countermeasures. I had a small, lithium-ion uninterruptible power supply in my bag, the same kind I use for remote terminal servers. I plugged the production switcher, the primary laptop, and the audio board directly into it. If a panicked hotel manager ran to the service closet and hit the main AV breaker, my entire station would keep running for at least 15 minutes, more than enough time. I set up a small, highly directional shotgun microphone on a discrete clamp, aiming it directly at the spot where the VIP table, my father's table, would be. I ran the feed into a separate battery-powered audio recorder. I didn't want to broadcast their reaction. I just wanted to record it, for the archive. At 6 p.m., I locked the control room and went to a service bathroom to change. I put on a standard-issue black server's uniform. I was now invisible. My final act of preparation was for failure. I had a sealed, tamper-proof envelope. Inside was a USB drive containing the full, unencrypted evidence package and the decryption key. A single sheet of paper contained Maeve's instructions. If I am detained, or if you do not hear from me by 2300, release this to the press contacts we discussed. Verify my safety first. If you can't, burn the package. I sent the envelope via a bonded courier service directly to Maeve's office, marked Urgent, Hold for Addressee. I slipped one more piece of tech into my pocket, a small AirTag, which I then discreetly taped to the underside of the main switcher console. If they confiscated the equipment after the fact, I would know where it went. I returned to the AV booth, the house lights down, the room filling with the murmur of 800 wealthy guests. I put on the headset. I was calm. This was just another system check. I looked at the program clock. I had a simple timer running on my phone. The trigger was set for 9:07 p.m., precisely after the scheduled end of the Thank You Sponsors video. I taped a small note to the console, just below the main monitor. It was my only reminder. No accusations, just display. I had left the AV booth for one final systems check. The wireless microphone receivers for the main podium were located in a rack in a small service closet just off the main lobby. I wanted to verify the signal strength myself, to ensure there was zero interference. I was dressed in the black server uniform, invisible. I blended in with the catering staff and the hotel technicians. I was kneeling, checking the antenna connections, when a pair of gleaming, hand-lasted shoes stopped 3 feet from my face. I knew the shoes. I looked up. My father, Graham Pierce, stood over me. He was encased in a bespoke tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly combed. He did not look angry. He looked burdened. He looked the way he did when a portfolio underperformed, a mixture of profound disappointment and cold resolve. His voice was quiet, engineered not to carry in the vast, gray marble lobby, where the sound of 800 guests already echoed like a distant tide. You embarrassed your stepmother. It was not a question. It was a verdict. It was the final, summary judgment. I rose slowly, wiping a smudge of dust from my hands onto my black pants. I had anticipated this. In the breast pocket of my server jacket, I had the single, folded sheet of paper. I pulled it out. It was the printout of the database query, the metadata, the COM, Apple, voice memos, transcript source tag, and the router log showing the deletion event, timestamped 06:41:14 a.m. I held it out to him. This is the data, I said. My voice was just as low. The original message, the deletion timestamp. Look at it. He stared at the paper as if I were handing him a venomous snake. He saw the lines of code, the IP addresses, the timestamps. He saw the truth, and he recoiled. He did not take the paper. He raised his hand, not to strike, but to dismiss. He pushed the paper, just his fingertips grazing the corner, forcing it back toward my chest. Conspiracy, he whispered. The word was a razor. This is a conspiracy. You are inventing this. You are trying to destroy her, to destroy us. He needed to believe it was a conspiracy. The alternative, that his wife was a manipulator and he was a fool, was a data point his system could not compute. It was an anomaly that would crash his entire world. He chose the lie because the lie was cleaner. It preserved the narrative. I saw the finality in his eyes. The circuit was closed. He had made his choice. Graham, darling. Monica materialized at his elbow. A vision in emerald green silk. She smelled overpoweringly of lilies and triumph. She slid her hand into the crook of his arm, her diamonds flashing under the lobby's 1,000-watt spotlights. Her smile was a blinding, charitable force. She looked at me, still in my black uniform, still holding the rejected printout. Her smile did not waver, but her eyes, they were cold, colder than the marble. She leaned in, as if to give me a forgiving, familial kiss. Her whisper was for me alone. A blade of ice slipped between my ribs. "You aren't clean enough to sit at this table, Mackenzie." She pulled back, her smile widening for the public. "We'll see you later, darling," she said, loud enough for Graham to hear, a perfect performance of a loving stepmother. As she turned, I saw Chloe. She was standing 10 feet away, her phone held up, recording. She was capturing a panning shot of the glittering lobby, the beautifully dressed guests, the ambiance for her social media story. Her lens, a perfect, impersonal circle of glass, panned across the scene. It swept past her father, it swept past Monica, and then it swept past me. It did not linger, it did not register. I was a shadow, I was a server, I was a non-entity. I was not a sister being banished. I was not even an obstacle. I was simply part of the background, irrelevant, invisible, a ghost in the machine. That look, or lack of it, was the final cut. I slowly folded the piece of paper, the metadata, the truth. I slipped it back into my pocket. My hand was steady. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, absolute certainty. The pressure in my chest was immense, but it was not the pressure of grief. It was the pressure of a hydraulic system achieving full power. "I came to see the lights," I said, to no one in particular. Graham just shook his head, his disappointment absolute. Monica, however, heard the ambiguity. Her smile tightened by a single, fractional millimeter. She had heard the steel under the words. She turned, signaled to a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit with an earpiece, the head of hotel security. She pointed at me, not as a daughter, but as a problem. I saw her lips move. I could read them. "That one. She's with the AV crew. If she causes any trouble at all, you remove her immediately. She is not to go near the stage." The security guard looked at me. I was just a technician in a black uniform. He nodded, his face impassive. My burner phone vibrated in my pocket. A single text from Maeve. I read it without taking the phone out. "It's live. Just let them touch the wire." I turned, giving the security guard a slight, cooperative nod, as if I were just a server acknowledging an executive. I walked away from the glittering lobby, away from the marble and the lilies and the lies. I walked down the long, carpeted hallway, pushed through the soundproof double doors, and entered the service corridor. The glamour vanished. Here, it was concrete floors, humming ice machines, and the smell of industrial disinfectant. This was my world. This was the backstage. I walked up the metal stairs to the mezzanine. I unlocked the AV control room. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. It was dark, lit only by the constellations of small, colored lights on the control boards. The one-way glass in front of me gave me a god's-eye view of the entire ballroom. 800 people, shimmering and unaware. I sat in the operator's chair. It was my cockpit, my substation. I put on the heavy broadcast headset, the microphone arching in front of my face. The sound of the ballroom was suddenly intimate, piped directly into my ears. I could hear the clink of silverware, the murmur of conversations. I checked my levels, audio, perfect, all camera feeds, live. Camera 1, the wide shot. Camera 2, the podium, close-up. Camera 3, the VIP table, table 1. I pushed the fader, my view zoomed in. There they were, Graham, looking straight ahead, regal and cold. Chloe, typing furiously on her phone, managing the narrative, and Monica, smiling, accepting compliments from the banker at the next table. The lights in the ballroom began to dim. A hush fell. The introductory music swelled, piped in from my playlist. On my monitor, Monica rose from the table. She adjusted her dress. She walked toward the stage. The spotlight found her. She ascended the small stairs and stood at the podium, bathed in a brilliant, pure white light. She looked out at the crowd, her face a mask of profound, heartfelt sincerity. She began to speak. "Thank you," she said, her voice smooth and warm, filling the vast room. "Thank you for joining us. When we began the Harbor Hearts initiative, We had one simple goal: to provide opportunity, to give back to the communities that are the lifeblood of this city, to reach out to our friends and neighbors at the port. I listened, my hand on the main video switcher. I watched the clock on my monitor. Her speech was scheduled for 10 minutes. The thank you sponsors video was 2 minutes. I looked at my playlist, my file. Circuit diagram final was cued. The room was dark. The only light was the one she commanded. The golden second was approaching. Monica's speech ended to a wave of sustained, enthusiastic applause. Through my headset, it was a roar. On the podium monitor, I watched her press her hands together, a perfect gesture of humility, and nod graciously. "Thank you," she mouthed. "Thank you." The lights dimmed further, and the pre-programmed thank you sponsors video began to play. The screen filled with the logos of banks, law firms, and at the very end, the gold star logo of North Bay Contractors. My eyes were on the program clock in the corner of my monitor. The sponsor video runtime was exactly 2 minutes. It was scheduled to end at 21:07. I watched the seconds tick down. My hand was not on a switch. The command was already programmed. The switcher was automated to roll the next file in the sequence. My 52-second file was not an interruption. It was simply the next item on the agenda. The North Bay logo faded. The screen went black for exactly 1/2 second. The clock hit 21:07. Wow. The feed cut. The massive screens, flanking the stage, lit up. There was no music, no explosion, just a clean, corporate graphic. It was the Harbor Hearts logo, the stylized ship's wheel. It pulsed once, then slid to the top left of the screen. It became the main breaker in a schematic. A thick, animated line, the color of money, flowed out from it. It moved into a box labeled Gala Fund. The room was silent. The applause had died, replaced by confusion. This was not the scheduled Our Future video. From the Gala Fund box, the line split. A small 20% stream flowed into boxes labeled with the names of the real charities Monica promoted. The main, 80% artery flowed into a series of 3 opaque boxes, labeled only Subcontractor A, Subcontractor B, and Subcontractor C. On camera 3, I watched the VIP table. My father was frowning, tilting his head, trying to understand this new graphic. Chloe had her phone up, presumably recording, but I saw her thumb stop moving. On screen, the 3 subcontractor lines converged, funneling the full, undiluted stream into one large node, North Bay Contractors. As this connection snapped into place, a timestamp faded in. Private meeting, M*/J Kelling, 09:30 a.m. The date was from 3 weeks ago. The room, which had been confused, was now utterly silent. I heard someone cough, and it sounded like a gunshot. Then, the audio track began. It was not music. It was the crystal-clear, isolated recording of my own voice, taken from the iMessage voice memo database. Stepmother beat me. The 4 words hung in the air, amplified by the $1 million sound system. I watched my father's face on the monitor. He flinched. It was a physical jolt, as if he'd been struck. He knew that phrase. Monica's head snapped up, her eyes wide, staring at the AV booth window. On the screen, the text appeared, stark white. Original fragment, 06:40:17 a.m. A half-second pause. Then, the full restored audio file played. Stepmother beat me to the permit meeting. The text on the screen changed. The deleted words, "To the permit meeting," flew into place, highlighted in red. The metadata tag faded in below it. Deletion event, kitchen iPad, 06:41:14 a.m. The 12-second gap. A new video file minimized the schematic and opened on the main screen. It was my dash cam footage, steady and clear. The timestamp in the corner was irrefutable. It showed the parking lot of the Port Authority building. It showed Monica's black Mercedes sedan pulling into a space. A moment later, a silver Audi, James Kelling's car, pulled in beside it. The 2 of them got out. They did not shake hands. They looked like partners, walking into the building together. On camera 3, I saw Chloe's phone lower. Her face was pale. Her eyes were no longer on the screen, but scanning the dark room, searching for the security guard. My father was rigid. He was staring at Monica. His face was unreadable, a mask of cold, controlled fury. Monica, at the podium, was no longer smiling. Her face was white. She made a sharp, subtle cut gesture with her right hand, aimed at the back of the room. She was signaling to security. She wanted the power cut. On screen, the final graphic appeared. The dashcam footage shrunk, and a simple bar graph overlaid the schematic. North Bay bid versus Harbor Line bid. It highlighted the key restrictive clauses in the permit tender, the ones Monica had advised on, which rendered the Harbor Line bid non-compliant before it was even submitted. The money circuit pulsed one last time. North Bay, the PAC, the council members. The entire diagram froze, every connection exposed. And then, the power cut. Someone, a panicked hotel manager, or the security guard Monica had signaled, had found the main ballroom breaker. The house lights died. The spotlights died. The entire room was plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. A woman gasped. Someone swore. But my screens did not flicker. My console, my audio board, my laptop, and the main projectors were running smoothly on the uninterruptible power supply I had hidden beneath the table. In the pitch-black ballroom, the 50-foot screens on stage remained on. The schematic of Monica's corruption glowed like an X-ray, the only light in a room of 800 people. The final subtitle faded in at the bottom. No allegations, only data. Verify authenticity. SGA-256. Hash E5D9F1A8C7. The full alphanumeric string filled the line. The room was tomb silent. There was no whispering. There was no movement. There was only the sound of 800 people. In the dark, breathing. I let the graphic hold. I let them read it. I let them absorb the truth. I counted. 50 seconds. 51. 52. The file's runtime completed. The screen went black. The automatic playlist cued the next file, the Our Future video, with its upbeat, soaring orchestral music, began to play. It was my cue. I reached for the house light controls on my board. I slowly, manually, brought the lights up, not to full brightness, but to a low, unforgiving dim wash. The audience was frozen. They were illuminated in the dim glow. All of them turned, staring at the stage. They looked like a congregation that had just witnessed a terrible, undeniable miracle. I switched my headset feed to the main podium microphone. I pushed the gain fader all the way up. Monica was still standing there, trapped in the video's bright, optimistic glow. Her hands were gripping the sides of the lectern. She tried to laugh. It was a terrible sound, a high, brittle shattering of air. "Well," she said, her voice echoing through the silent hall. It seems we have a rather malicious technical glitch." But the microphone was too good. My equalization was too precise. It didn't just capture her words. It captured the sharp, frantic intake of her breath. It captured the paper-thin tremor in her voice. It captured the sound of her swallowing, a dry, clicking noise. She had lost control of the narrative. The signal was broken. The truth was in the circuit. I left the AV booth exactly 3 minutes after the lights came up. I didn't wait for security. I didn't wait for my father. I took the service stairs down to the loading dock, stepped out into the cold, wet air of the harbor, and walked the 2 miles back to my loft. I was home, the black server uniform in a pile by the door, before the first guest had likely retrieved their car from the valet. My burner phone, which I had left on the workbench, was vibrating. A text from Maeve. "Package delivered. Go dark. Do not answer any number you don't know, especially not theirs." I sat in the dark, my loft silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I watched the clock. At 11:01 p.m., exactly 1 minute after my deadline. Maeve's package was triggered. The first article dropped at 4:17 a.m. It was on the landing page of the Boston Independent, a local, aggressive investigative news site known for digging into City Hall. The reporter, a woman named Sarah Jensen, hadn't just written a summary. She had embedded the data. The headline was stark: The Harbor Hearts Money Circuit, Gala Funds, City Permits, and North Bay Contractors. Sarah Jensen had taken my schematic and added legal context. She had verified the hash of my evidence package. She had confirmed the public records of Monica's advisory role, the PAC contributions, and North Bay's sponsorship. She had even, somehow, gotten a statement from a stunned gala attendee who confirmed the unscheduled presentation. The story was not about a family dispute. It was not about a text message. It was about influence peddling. It was about a civic-minded philanthropist who had allegedly used her position to rig a multi-million-dollar public contract, all while laundering the kickback as a charitable donation. My name was not mentioned, not once. I was just the data. By 6 a.m., the aftershock began. A spokesperson for the mayor's office, clearly blindsided, issued a 2-sentence statement about reviewing the integrity of all public-private partnerships. By 9 a.m., the City Ethics Committee announced an immediate and formal review of the entire cold storage warehouse permit process, in light of new information regarding potential undisclosed conflicts of interest. The independent article was cited in the press release. At 10:30 a.m., North Bay Contractors went into damage control. Their statement was a masterpiece of corporate denial. They were deeply concerned by the malicious and unfounded associations in the article. They stated they had followed all compliance and disclosure protocols in their bidding, and then, in the final, fatal paragraph, they announced they were regrettably withdrawing their financial support from the Harbor Hearts Gala, pending a full investigation to avoid any appearance of impropriety. They had cut Monica loose. They were running from the fire. The social media explosion was instantaneous, but the target was not. At first, Monica, it was Chloe. Around noon, Chloe, in a move of profound narrative miscalculation, posted her video. It was filmed in the pristine white kitchen of the Beacon Hill house. She was wearing a cashmere sweater, her eyes red-rimmed, her face a mask of practiced victimhood. Our family is being betrayed," she whispered, her phone held close, her voice cracking. "There are terrible, fabricated lies being spread by someone very close to us, who is deeply, deeply unwell." She was trying to build a firewall, to paint me as the crazy, jealous daughter, exactly as Monica had planned. It backfired, immediately. The comment section, usually a curated stream of "you're glowing" and "so inspiring," turned into a digital courtroom. This unwell person provided hashes of the data. Can you? I don't care about your family drama. I care about the North Bay contract. Let's talk about the permit meeting. This is a non-denial denial. Where's the metadata? Stop protecting your mother and answer the questions about the PAC money. Chloe, who had built her entire identity on managing the narrative, was being consumed by it. The video was ratioed into oblivion. By 3 p.m., it was deleted, but the screenshots were everywhere. The silence from my father was absolute. He didn't call, he didn't text, but I knew what was happening. At 4 p.m., Maeve sent me another text. It was just a link to the Boston Financial Journal. The article was brief. It noted significant volatility in the stock of Graham Pierce's banking consortium, tied to emerging reputational risks concerning one of its senior partners. I knew what that meant. Graham hadn't just received a text. He had been invited, not asked, to a private discussion with the other senior partners. He was in a boardroom with gray-faced men. Men who did not care about his wife's feelings or his daughter's instability. They cared about the bank's charter. They cared about the stock price. They cared about the reputational risk of being tied, even tangentially, to a public corruption scandal. Graham's perfect, stable narrative, the one he had protected at all costs, was now the primary liability. Monica's response came late that evening. She had hired a crisis PR firm, one of the most expensive and ruthless in the city. Her new spokesperson issued a statement. It was defiant. Mrs. Raines is the victim of a coordinated, criminal attack. It read, her personal communications were stolen, illegally edited, and presented out of context to create a false and defamatory narrative. She will not be bullied. This is a private family matter being maliciously twisted for ulterior motives. Mrs. G. Raines is exploring all legal options against the parties responsible for this illegal hack and subsequent smear campaign. It was a smart move. She was trying to shift the conversation from the content of the data to the method of its acquisition. She was painting herself as the victim of a crime, and me, implicitly, as the criminal. My burner phone rang. It was Maeve. "You're doing perfectly," she said, her voice quick and sharp. "You are silent. You are invisible. This is exactly right. They are panicking, and they are making mistakes." "She's calling me a hacker," I said, my voice flat. "Of course she is," Maeve said. "She's trying to bait you. She needs you to come forward. She needs you to go on TV, to get emotional, to look angry. She needs you to confirm Chloe's unwell narrative. The moment you make this about your feelings, you lose. You are not a person right now. Kenzie, you are a source. The data is the witness. Let the data do the talking." She was right. I said nothing. I stayed in my loft. I went dark. The next day, I went to work. I drove to the terminal at my usual time. The silence in the control room was different. It wasn't hostile. It was respectful. No one mentioned the gala. No one asked about my family. Sal, the son of the man who had taught me about lightning, walked past my console. He put a fresh, steaming coffee on my desk without breaking stride. He just nodded. "Power's back in phase, McGee," he said, and kept walking. That was all. It was everything. I worked my shift. I routed power to the reefer stacks. I coordinated a diagnostic on the substation at Pier 4. I did my job. When I got home that evening, there was a new encrypted email on my burner. It was from the same anonymous source as before, the one who had sent me the calendar invitation. The subject line was, again, blank. Inside was a single attachment. It wasn't a screenshot, it was an Excel file. I opened it in a sandboxed, offline environment. It was an internal bid sheet from North Bay Contractors. It was their full line-item budget for the cold storage project. My eyes scanned the columns, materials, labor, contingency. And then, at the bottom, I saw it, a single line item, under consulting and procurement fees. The fee was a flat $100,000. Beside the line item was a memo field, a referral code. MR17, Monica Raines, 17, the date of her private meeting with Kelling. This wasn't just a conflict of interest. This wasn't just influence peddling. This was a direct, itemized payment. This was the receipt. I looked at the file for a long time. My hand was not shaking. I felt no anger. I felt no triumph. I felt the cold, calm certainty of a completed circuit. I did not call Maeve. I did not call the Independent. I logged into a new, secure email account. I attached the file. I found the public email address for the chair of the City Ethics Committee. I sent the file with no subject and only one line in the body. Supplemental data for your review. I hit send. The legal spiral, which had been turning, was now an inescapable vortex. I had added another, heavier loop to the wire. I shut down the burner phone. I made coffee. I continued to exist. I did not speak. I did not accuse. I just continued, very calmly, to complete the circuit. The week after the gala was defined by a new kind of silence. The city was loud. The news cycle was churning. The Ethics Committee had officially subpoenaed Monica, and the Independent was running follow-ups. But my loft was quiet. My burner phone was off, its battery dead. My personal phone, the one on the new prepaid plan, remained silent. I had unplugged from their grid. Now, I needed to recalibrate my own. I took a day off from the terminal, my first in over a month. I drove west, out of the city, away from the salt and the steel, to Worcester. I picked up my grandmother. She is not my grandmother by blood. She was my mother's next-door neighbor, the woman who effectively raised me after my mother died, the woman who stepped in when Graham became too absorbed in his new life. She is 81, with hands gnarled from a lifetime of needlepoint and stripping copper wire for her late husband's radio repair shop. She was the one who first showed me how a tightly wound coil of copper could pull a voice from thin air. I brought her back to the loft. She stood in the middle of the room, her small, bird-like frame taking in the brick walls, the steel workbench, the view of the container cranes. She looked at the single, bare bulb I had hanging over my kitchen counter. "This light is terrible," she said. It was the first thing she'd said in 20 minutes. "It's a liar's light. It makes everything look gray." I made her tea, the strong black kind she likes, and I told her everything. The text, the lockout, the data, the gala, the schematic. I laid it out clinically, like a systems report. She listened, sipping her tea, her eyes on the black water of the channel. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. She set her cup down. "When your grandfather and I bought our house," she said, her voice dry, like old paper, "we found out the man who sold it to us had built a new wall in the living room. He did it to hide a massive crack in the foundation, right up the chimney." She looked at me, her eyes clear and sharp. "You could get mad," she said. "You could get a sledgehammer, start swinging, and bring the whole rotten chimney down on your head. Or you could get a level, a line, and a set of blueprints, and you could resurvey the whole damn house. You find out where the true load-bearing walls are, and you expose the crack for what it is. You show it, so it can be fixed." She reached across the table and patted my hand. Her skin was cool. "You're not taking revenge, Mackenzie. You're just resurveying the house. You're showing them where the real foundation is. Some people can't stand to see the blueprints. They'd rather live in the house that's about to fall down, just because the wall is painted a nice color." I drove her home that evening. The quiet in the car was comfortable, a shared understanding. The next day, I wrote a letter. I used a sheet of my heavy, gridded engineering paper. I used my mechanical pencil. I wrote 3 lines, 3 words: truth, order, visibility. I put the paper in a simple, plain white envelope. I addressed it to Graham Pierce, at his bank, not his home. I enclosed a second, smaller note. "I will meet you, but there are conditions. 1, no public relations people. 2, no one else. 3, you do not interrupt me. 4, you do not lie." I did not mention honor. I did not mention love. I did not ask for an apology. I did not sign it. It was not a letter from a daughter. It was a pre-meeting protocol from a systems manager. I sent it via certified mail. That weekend, I went to the hardware store. I bought a new lighting system for my kitchen. It was a low-profile track, with 5 small directional spotlights. I spent all of Saturday on a ladder, running the new wiring, mounting the track to the heavy wood beams. I installed a dimmer switch. When I was finished, I flipped the breaker. The light was different. It was warm, a deep, rich, golden yellow. It lit the work surfaces, but it was soft. It made the old brick glow. It made the scarred wooden floors look less like a work site and more like a home. I found a pencil and wrote a note in my engineering log. On the page after the gala schematic, "Forgiving light is different from forgetting light." The news continued to trickle out. Monica, through her crisis PR firm, announced she was temporarily stepping down from all her advisory and charitable board positions to focus on her family during this difficult private time. It was a tactical retreat, designed to get her name out of the headlines. Chloe's social media presence evaporated. The slickly produced videos, the gala photos, the inspirational quotes, all gone. Her account was still active, but it was just pictures of coffee cups, a latte, on a marble table, an espresso, by a window. It was the digital equivalent of silence. She was broadcasting. but she was saying nothing. The real world, my world, continued. On Tuesday, we had a failure. A high-priority reefer stack, a 5-high column of containers, all refrigerated, all full of perishable pharmaceuticals, lost its primary power feed. The alarms in the control room blared. The backup generator failed to kick in. It was a cascade failure, the kind that gives me cold sweats. I was at the main console. I ran the diagnostic. The fault was in the primary switchgear, high up on the gantry. If we didn't isolate it, the fault could arc, trip the entire Piers substation, and worst case, start a fire that would take out the whole row. Millions of dollars in cargo, all turning to smoke. "I'm going," I said, grabbing my hard hat and harness. "Kenzie, the fire crew is on the way," my supervisor started. "We don't have time," I said. "I have to throw the disconnect now." I ran. I didn't wait for the service elevator. I took the maintenance ladder, climbing hand over hand, my harness clattering against the steel. I was 70 feet up in 2 minutes, the wind from the harbor trying to peel me off the rungs. I could smell it, the ozone, the smell of burning insulation, the smell of chaos. I reached the switchgear box. It was hot to the touch. I hooked my harness line to the rail, braced myself, and unlatched the heavy steel door. Inside was a hell of light, a flickering, spitting, blue-white arc. The main bus bar was melting. There was no time for finesse. I grabbed the insulated manual override, a 4-foot fiberglass pole. I jammed it into the main disconnect switch and threw my entire body weight against it. There was a deafening percussive crack. The arc vanished. The sound died. The smell of ozone was replaced by the acrid stench of burnt plastic. I hung there in the sudden, vibrating silence, my arms shaking. The pier was dark, but the fire was out. I had cut the circuit. I had saved the chain. I climbed down, my legs unsteady. I walked back into the control room. The crew was silent. My supervisor just handed me a bottle of water. I had done my job. I had organized the lightning. When I got back to my loft that night, exhausted, my hands raw, there was a new text on my phone. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "I want to talk, in person, Dad." He had gotten the letter. He had accepted the terms. This was not a message from Graham Pierce, banking executive. This was from Dad. I stood by the window, my new warm kitchen light at my back. I looked at the dark water, at the reflection of the cranes. I typed my reply. "Accepted. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. I sent him the address, not my loft, not his house. Warehouse D7. It's an old, decommissioned transfer shed at the edge of the channel. It's empty, just a cavern of corrugated metal, concrete, and timber pylons. The only light comes from the 2 sodium floods on the outside, which shine through the dirty windows and cast long, wavering reflections of the water onto the steel ceiling. It is a place of absolute, unvarnished reality. It is a place where you cannot hide. Warehouse D7 was not a building. It was a void, a huge, cavernous shell of corrugated metal and black-painted steel trusses, sitting on rotting timber pylons at the dead end of the industrial channel. The air was thick with the smell of creosote, rust, and the low-tide mud of the Fort Point Channel. The only light came from 2 ancient, high-pressure sodium floods mounted on the exterior, shining their harsh, orange light through the grime-caked windows. They cast long, distorted squares of light onto the concrete floor, and the movement of the water outside made the light shimmer and crawl up the metal walls. Every sound was amplified: the rhythmic slap of water against the pilings, the groan of the old structure settling, the distant, metallic shriek of a train. I was there first. I chose the spot. A heavy rusted steel table, left over from some long-dead shipping operation, sat in the center of one of the patches of light. I dragged 2 metal folding chairs, their feet scraping like a scream on the concrete, and placed them on opposite sides. I waited. At 7 p.m., precisely, I heard the sound of an expensive car engine, idling, then cutting off, a car door, heavy, solid, closing, Footsteps on the gravel outside. Not the sharp, confident click of his dress shoes, a slower, heavier tread. The huge sliding metal door was already open a few feet. He slipped through the gap. Graham Pierce, my father. He stood in the shadow, letting his eyes adjust. He was not in a tuxedo. He was in a dark, simple wool coat, no tie. He looked older than I had ever seen him. The dim, watery light carved new lines into his face. He was alone. He saw me, sitting at the table. He walked forward, his steps echoing, and stopped on the other side. In his hand, he was holding a manila envelope. He didn't look at me. He looked at the envelope, then placed it on the steel table between us. He slid it across. "The Independent," he said. His voice was a dry rasp. I didn't need to open it. I knew what it was. He had brought a printout, a hard copy. I could see the edge of the newspaper photo he had printed from the website. Monica's smiling face, right next to the stark, undeniable graphic of the money circuit. He met my eyes. The disappointment was gone. The anger was gone. All that was left was a vast, cold, empty exhaustion. "I trusted the fastest option," he said. His voice was low, barely louder than the sound of the water. "That's how I've always worked. Find the quickest, cleanest path. You had become a disruption, a problem. It was faster to cut you than to ask you." I did not respond. I reached into my own jacket pocket. I pulled out the folded sheet of gridded engineering paper, the one I had tried to hand him in the lobby, the one he had refused. I unfolded it and placed it on the table, next to his envelope. The full iMessage transcript, the router log, the 12-second deletion. Beat me to the permit meeting. "I'm not suing your wife," I said. My voice was flat. It didn't echo. It just landed, heavy, on the metal table. "I'm not going to the police. I don't want her money." I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the sound of the water fill the space. "I just need you to see correctly," I said. "I just need you to look at the schematic, the real one." He looked down at the printout I had given him. He stared at the line. Apple. Voice memos. Transcript. He stared at the timestamp. 6:41:14 a.m. "She showed it to me," he whispered. He was confessing. To me, or to the warehouse. I wasn't sure. "She showed me the iPad. Her hands were shaking. She said she was terrified. That you were lashing out. That you were threatening her." He finally looked up at me, his eyes hollow. "I believed her." "No," he corrected himself, shaking his head. "No, that's not true. It's not that I believed her. It's that I needed to believe her." He gestured around the vast, empty, dirty warehouse. "This, your world, it was an inconvenience to the narrative, the story of our family, the one she built. It was clean. It was successful. It was good. And I saw the crack forming. I knew if I looked too close, if I asked one question, I knew what I would find. So I chose not to look. I chose to protect the image. I looked away, and I let her cut you." He had finally said it. He had surveyed the foundation and seen the crack for himself. "I am not her victim," I said. "And I am not yours. I am the operations manager. And this," I tapped my printout, "is the damage report." "What do you want, Mackenzie?" he asked. "What are your terms?" "My terms are the same as my letter," I said. "Truth, order, visibility." I laid them out. 1. You will resign. Effective immediately. From the finance board of the Harbor Hearts Gala, and any other board Monica sits on. 2. You will issue a private letter, not a press release, a letter, to the partners at your bank and to our extended family. It will state that the iMessage was a fabricated accusation, that the full, unedited transcript has been recovered, and that the narrative of my instability was false. 3. You will make a public statement, as a concerned citizen of Boston, supporting the Ethics Committee's full, open, and transparent investigation into the Port Authority permit process. You will not protect her. He stood there, Absorbing the conditions. This wasn't a request for an apology. This was a work order. This was the protocol for repair. He nodded, slowly, but it was a firm, solid gesture. Done, he said. All of it. He looked at the empty metal chair next to me. He looked at the grime and the rust. After, he said, his voice hesitant, cracking for the first time. After it's done, is there a seat at the table for me? I looked at the empty chair. I thought of the pearl. I thought of the $25 gift card. I thought of the clean work. I reached out and pulled the cold, noisy metal chair back from the table. An invitation. Anyone who respects the circuit has a seat, I said. A week later, the knots were untied. A private, terse letter of correction was sent from Graham Pierce's office. Monica, now facing a formal city investigation, lost her advisory role permanently. The permit process for the cold storage warehouse was officially frozen, voided, and rescheduled for a new, fully transparent public bidding process, under a different set of rules. I had one last thing to do. I took out my old burner phone, the one I had used to call Maeve. I powered it on. I had one number in the contacts, my own. I sent a final text message. From that number to my new, clean SIM, a log entry, to close the loop. No applause needed, just the right light. I pulled the SIM card out, snapped it in half, and tossed it into the channel. That night, I didn't go straight home from the terminal. I walked the quay, past the reefer stacks, to the end of the pier. The wind was cold and sharp, smelling of the deep, clean salt of the open ocean. I looked across the channel, at the string of lights on the opposite shore, one by one. As the city's automatic timers kicked in, the high-mast sodium lights flickered, warmed, and then ignited, casting their orange glow on the black water. I took a deep breath. The pressure in my chest, the pressure I'd been carrying for weeks, was gone. The voltage was stable. The system was balanced. My new phone rang, a number I didn't recognize, but it wasn't the burner. I answered. Kenzie? It was my father's voice, but it was different, clearer. It's me, he said. I'm on a new plan, my own. I smiled, a small, tired smile. Hi, Dad. It's done, he said. The letter, the statement. There was a long pause. Tomorrow night, I was wondering, what do you need? I'm okay, Dad. No, he said. Not like that. Tomorrow night, for dinner. What do you need me to bring? I looked out at the lights, warm and steady. I've got it covered, I said. Just show up. I hung up. I walked back to my loft, to the warmth, to the smell of old wood and the sound of my refrigerator. I walked into my kitchen. Under the new, forgiving light, I opened a cabinet and I took down a second plate. I placed it on the table. I went to my workbench and opened my engineering log. I turned to a new, blank page. When the circuit is cut, I wrote, don't scream at the darkness. Find the breaker. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let us know where you're listening from in the comments. We'd love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. Subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button. It really helps this story get heard by more people.